Welcome to the Learning Pro Live. My name's Cath Ellis, and this is a daily vlog, live stream from me talking about my life as a learning experience designer. I get people reaching out to me every week, sometimes every other day, asking about how do you become a learning designer, instructional designer, learning experience designer, one of those. And it's, you know, something that I thought was a very interesting topic. And I thought we would bring a very special guest on to have a chat about it. So I won't waffle on. I'll introduce our very special guest, Tim Slade.
Hey, Cath.
Hi, Tim.
How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Really good.
Good.
Oh,
What day of the week is it there for
Tim.
you? It's Friday for you, right?
It is Friday morning.
Oh, I'm
It's
jealous.
Friday morning, Thursday evening. I know the week's nearly over. I'm
I know.
excited.
I don't know where it went, but I'm still on Thursday time here.
Well, I'm sure you're exactly the same. You get lots of people reaching out to you on this topic, and I thought it'd be a really good topic for us to kind of break down some of the myths and talk about our experience becoming I call myself an e-learning designer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you call yourself?
I don't know. It's a question I get asked all the time, and especially recently, there's been a lot of folks looking to either transition into our industry or expand their skill set into our industry. Do I call myself an e-learning designer? Like I guess that's what I call myself. It's kind of evolved over the years because, there was a time where I thought being an instructional designer was a separate thing than being an e-learning designer. And then I realized instructional design is a function of my job. So sometimes if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't know what e-learning is, I just say I'm like a learning professional or something like that.
Yeah.
So e-learning designer works.
Yeah. Or a learning experience designer. I think one of those rather than an instructional designer now that I'm running my own business. It's been really interesting the last few weeks. I've seen a lot of conversations online about, I don't know if it's bagging instructional design and I don't think any of these terms we should be banging. I think it's, I think instructional designer might be just a more old fashioned term, or when someone's, I don't know, I won't even put a definition on it, but I've been watching the threads on LinkedIn, and there's been a lot of conversation about it. But no matter,
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, no matter what you call yourself, I think you're the one that understands what you're doing in the industry, and don't get too worried about, titles and things like that, because I think a number of them blend into one another.
I think a lot of the confusion comes from the fact that, I talked about this in a presentation I actually gave at the learning conference about portfolios. And I think a lot of time, our industry has evolved over the years, and there was a time where our industry was focused on two things: content creation and facilitation. And so if you wanted to be like an if you needed an e-learning course, you might create a storyboard, but then you would outsource that to a developer, someone who knew how to write code. But over the years, I think as the tools that we use now every day are accessible to a larger audience, you don't have to know how to write code to create e-learning. Then we started adopting e-learning designer, and then multimedia developer. And I think as the capability of what we can do as an instructional designer, as a learning professional, expands, it causes us to reevaluate how do we define ourselves. And so now I think the learning experience designer, that LXD title, is kind of this overarching umbrella that we've adopted. And who knows what it'll be next year. Next year there'll be some new buzzword that we'll start calling ourselves here eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a tricky one as well. We've got quite a few people watching here, Tim.
Oh, good. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, we've got Ashanti from yesterday.
Hi, Ashanti.
I was talking to Ashanti, and her session was great. We've got Marv.
Hi, Marv.
I don't know what that is in your profile picture, Marv. It looks like French toast or something, or
That sounds
steaks.
good.
We've got Chris, who's saying hi.
Hi, Chris.
And we've got Jeanette, who's saying hi, Jeanette Knoll. And we've got Gemini giving us a smile.
So Cath, how did you get into e-learning? I realized, I feel like I'm always telling my story. I don't know your story, actually.
You don't?
No, I don't.
So I started actually working for Carnival Cruise Lines in 1999. I'm really old. And I went out to Miami and I was a purser. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. It's like instructional designer. It's an older term. I class it as. So it's like a guest service guest services. Sure. And very quickly I was identified as being very strong training other pursers. And they just said, are you interested in transitioning over to the corporate training department? And I was like, yeah, get me away from these guests.
Yeah.
So my job was actually running the crew training center on board the ships. So you would be dedicated to one of the ships and you would just be in charge of doing all the safety training when the crew members came on board, and crowd and crisis management, and doing all the induction, all the orientation training, safety training, all that kind of good stuff. So it was really facilitation. There was a lot of training though in the crew training center in the evening. So I'd make little training programs. I called them training programs. They were just PowerPoints at the time because back then it was like CD-ROMs.
Yeah.
So I'd make these little kind of training modules on, how to kind of blog or how to do these things. And then in 2005, I came to Australia and I ended up working for the police. And at the police academy, I was just waiting for modules to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And I was what was the department I was working for? Learning Research Services.
Okay.
And again, I was an education consultant. We were working on the curriculum for the police, for the recruits. So there I was, kind of waiting for modules. And I actually started out with Captivate, just downloaded it one day. And I think I made a module in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. And they just identified me as, they just said, oh, yeah, this looks good. So and next thing I was down in media and online learning services. So
you have no formal background in instructional design or learning?
No. At the time that I went to the police, I didn't even have a qualification in education. It was at that point that I went to the police that I did a bachelor of Bachelor of Adult Learning and Development.
Mm-hmm.
And straight after that, I led on to doing a Master of Education. So,
okay.
It was one of those things, Tim, and I said this to Devlin Peck yesterday when we were chatting, that I think it was Devlin, that I found that I loved facilitation. I loved mm-hmm. training. Because I was always a strong person with my design skills were always strong. Finding e-learning where I could design things and mm-hmm. still train people was just the perfect blend for me.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that was it. I just was always a person kind of from being quite young, who made invitations, made posters for people, made T-shirts, So it was just that thing where I was finally able to, in my industry, train.
That's so cool.
Design things. Yeah. So, yeah, that was it, basically. And we know your story, but I know your story, but go ahead and tell everyone your story.
Well, so what's interesting about your story is I didn't realize that you had a kind of a segue into the criminal justice world. So, I feel like I tell this story all the time. So for those of you who know the story, you're going to hear it again. So I apologize. But while I tell it, by all means, like put in the chat, tell us how you got into e-learning for those of you who are into it. Because I think, so the reason why this is, I always love telling this story is because I think there's so many folks who get into our industry, they fall into it by accident because they were good at being, in your case, a purser, whatever that is. And somebody says, hey, you're so good at that, you should teach others how to do that thing, right? And so for me, and so I think people do that, and then they get into our industry and they have this like imposter syndrome of like, why am I here? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm around all these other educated people. And so for me, I had that because I have a background in criminal justice, and I used to catch shoplifters for a living. I worked in retail loss prevention, and which is a lot of fun. And I have a lot of stories about that. And my boss literally one day came along and he said, hey, you're really good at catching shoplifters, and there's a training position opened in the corporate loss prevention training department. You should apply for it. So I applied for the job and I got it. I was 23 at the time. This was back in 2009. And I moved across country. I'd never lived on my own. And I kind of fell into this position where I was creating training content. And my first major project was to create the series of 5 e-learning courses on how to catch a shoplifter. And at the time, it was I was using Articulate Studio 09, which for those of you who don't know is a PowerPoint-based plugin. And so I created these 5 e-learning courses. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what a stakeholder was. I didn't know what a storyboard was. I totally stumbled through it. But it was through that experience that I learned that not only did I really enjoy doing that, I also learned I had a talent for visual design and making things look really beautiful on the screen. And I loved the intersection of the visual design component, the educational component, and then the interactivity component. And so I spent, like 2.5 years in that role. And I ran into what I called this career identity crisis, where I wasn't sure, was I good at what I was doing because I was kind of my own subject matter expert, like I knew everything about catching shoplifters, or was I good at it because I was just good at it? And the reason why that was so nerve-wracking for me was I wasn't sure whether I was going to be good at it in a different context. Could I be good at e-learning on a totally different topic? And so I decided to make the leap. I took a totally different role, a different learning role, creating e-learning. And I discovered, oh yeah, I'm good at e-learning. And that was like back in 2009. So I'm here now and still doing it. So it worked out pretty well for me. Yeah.
Yes, it's really, it's, I was talking to Janine, my wife, last night, and, I feel like I'm in an industry that I've waited my whole life to be in this industry, all the decisions that I made over the years, when I finally got into this industry, and, I can't believe I'm actually saying, I got my hands on Captivate for the first time, and I made that module because now I absolutely cannot stand Captivate. Yeah. But at the time, it was like, I can make really cool stuff here, out of nothing. I can make something that's great. And I love it. And even now, because people say, why are you still building things? Why are you still making e-learning? I don't want to give it up. I love it. I love being creative every day. And, we've got loads of people. I'll tell you, I've got to get through some of these things in the chat here, Tim, because people are going off. We've got Chris saying hi, Andrew. We've got Chris Walden. He's from New Zealand. How you going, Chris? We have got Paul. That's my friend, Paul Carey. What are you doing, Paul? Great to see you. We've got Tracy saying hello. We've got Marv. Any advice for subject matter experts tasked with developing our courses from face-to-face e-learning. We'll get to that. We've got Ashanti. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video. Good on you, Ashanti. We've got Chris. Cath is a creative and didn't realize it at work right away. He said, I too am a inadvertent L&D pro.
Oh, I like that, inadvertent.
Ashanti said, I was a teacher trainer. I decided I wanted to be an instructional designer instead, so I joined ID Bootcamp and got a new job.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's these will be some of the things that we're talking about as far as different ways people can learn and transition into this industry.
Well, I think so many people spend, I don't want to say waste because I think that's negative, but spend their time waiting to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And one of the things I've learned to embrace, and I say this to anybody when you're kind of on this precipice of trying to figure out, do I stick with what I've been doing or do I go down this unbeaten path or this unfamiliar path, is I always embrace the unfamiliar path, because it's going to expose you to things that you never knew were possible before. I mean, that's what I faced. I could have just continued working in the field of loss prevention, catching shoplifters and doing all of that, and it probably would have had a great career. It probably would have been a lot of fun. But I think when you're at a fork in the road, there's a reason that fork's there. There's a reason you're seeing that path there, because there's something about that path that's, caught your interest. Otherwise you would have never seen it in the first place. And so you take it, and that's how people grow, and that's how people discover things that they never knew were possible for themselves. And it's kind of this, our careers go through these evolutions all the time. I mean, as I think about how my career's evolved, it went from loss prevention to creating e-learning in the corporate world to creating e-learning as working for a vendor. And then it evolved to me speaking at conferences, and then evolved to me being a freelancer. And each of those evolutions were a moment where I was at a fork in the road. And, I could have never imagined even, 5 years ago when I was working for an e-learning vendor that I would be doing what I'm doing now. And so, that's the only way you grow, is when you get outside of your comfort zone. That's the only way you build your skills and grow is to take that unbeaten path.
And we've both known each other for quite a long time, Tim. We've, how many years now?
I have
we've been
no
talking
idea.
to one another.
Years.
For a number of years.
Yeah.
And, I think back about when I was at the police, how my mindset was. I was really passionate about learning, and I decided to go and join an agency. So this is some advice that I give people as well. Going from working for the government, where they did manage projects well, but going to an agency where you have to account for every minute of your day. You are putting that timesheet in. You have to do this much billable hours. You're being, and I was lucky enough to work for an agency that would come and sit down and say, we've got this new client. Can we sit down and work out how long you think it's going to take to do, the storyboard, the learning the learning strategy, the course overview, the visual mock-ups, every part I actually had input into so that they could quote the job right. And I learned so much that when I was able to start my own business, it was like, okay, I have all this knowledge. I can quote things. So I was glad that I had that opportunity to go to an agency. And I say to a lot of people who, are working out there and going, I don't know what to do. I say, go and work for an agency, go and suss things out, exactly how they do things, how they cost things. And it will give you a leg up to being able to kind of go out. And if that's what you're wanting to do, freelance, just suss out how the big boys do it, whether you even take freelance work from agencies to work out how they do it. And, just don't jump into it without understanding how the industry kind of works. And that I think that gave me a lot of confidence. And during the time that I've known you, I'm the same. I've evolved, like, and I don't think I've flourished the way that I have until I actually went out on my own. And I didn't need to ask that boss for permission to go to a conference. I was like, for someone who's in Australia, I was able to go, well, screw you. I'm just going to buy my own ticket and go. I don't need to ask you permission to go to this conference. So, you know, it's really freeing to be able to do that. And then, you know, I'm going to apply to speak at a conference, you know, because, you know, imagine going to your boss and saying, can I apply to speak? And they're like, oh, you know, so that's you. You're choosing your own
destiny. That sounds so cheesy, but you're choosing your own path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Two things that you said there. What the first part, how you talked about like joining an agency and learning how the big boys do it. I think what you're actually describing is something that I've been bouncing around in my head, and I don't know exactly what to call it yet. I call it like compounding your skills, or I read an article on Medium about skill stacking, and it's this idea, and it's something I realized that I've done over the years. Let me give you a great example. So I remember even long before I ever got into the world of e-learning, I remember I was still working in loss prevention. I have this very vivid memory. I was at home one night and I was like, gosh, I would just love to write a book. I would love to be able to write a book. But I had no idea what I wanted to write a book on. I had no idea how to write a book. I had no idea how to publish a book. And when I got my first job in e-learning, I learned how to use a program called InDesign to create participant guides and facilitator guides. It's like Microsoft Word on steroids. And that was a little skill that I put in my back pocket. And then years later, I worked for an agency, Artisan eLearning. I managed their sister company, eLearning Uncovered, where I helped self-publish several books on how to use Storyline, all the eLearning Uncovered books that are on Amazon. And that taught me how to actually author a book and how to self-publish a book, like the whole process and how to market it. That was another skill I put in my back pocket. And then if we fast forward to 2018 or 2017, what I wanted to write a book on, how to write a book, the programs I needed to use, and how to market it, I realized I had all of those skills in my back pocket. I just needed to rearrange them and use them in a different way. And so one of the things I've done throughout my career, and I'm not saying that like as a shameless plug just because I have a second edition of my book coming out in a couple of weeks, we'll talk about that later. But the reason why I mention that though is I think too often people, they're collecting these skills through all these experiences and not realizing that if you look at them and take inventory of your skills and look at how you can use them in different ways, you can capitalize them on them in different ways that you wouldn't have realized before.
Absolutely.
And so to your point, like, yes, go out and experience what it means to, or what it's like to work for a small company or to subcontract for a vendor, or go work for a large corporation or a different organization. Get out of your comfort zone and pick up skills from that you can then use later. You may not realize it at the time, but it will in retrospect.
Absolutely. And and this will be the next journey. You know, this has been your journey. This has been your where you're now imparting your knowledge and your expertise, and the same as what I'm trying to do here. You know, what I'm trying to do here. You know, I was talking to Ashanti yesterday and saying, I want to get vendors on. I want to, you know, ask those questions like, articulate, when are we going to become fully responsive with your Storyline authoring tool, you know, and be able to get designers on and just be able to talk about different things that just we haven't really had, and you know, just adding another platform to the network, you know, the same as what you're doing, you're imparting your knowledge through your book. We have got a couple of people who've also given us their stories. Chris is saying here, I think he's answering someone's question. Gemini, okay. I work in an industry where you really aren't given the time to fully do the process to the zero. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really hard that you're under pressure so much. You feel like I haven't even got this fine tuned. Like I have to, deliver this out to the client. And Tim will also maybe we'll talk a little bit about how when is it the point where you have to stop working on a project as a freelancer. I mean, I'm pretty good. I know how to budget my jobs now, and I give myself a certain amount of hours to do things, and that's it. I know I'm pretty good at estimating it and working to that. So, but I know it's very hard when you work out there in the industry and you don't have the time to do that.
One of the things I learned really early on is that the work, especially when you work for a company, you're working for somebody else 9 to 5 or whatever, the work you do 9 to 5 is not the exciting work. That's not the work you're going to put on your portfolio. It rarely is the work you're going to put in your portfolio. And so one of the things I started doing to help develop my skills was, during my nights and weekends, I would go open up Storyline and build a course on the most benign things, like how to cook a turkey. That's literally something I built. It's in my portfolio, and I've won awards for the stupid course on how to cook a turkey. But that's how the reason why I do that, though, is because you're not beholden to, your crazy stakeholders and subject matter experts and branding standards that prevent you from doing that creative work. And so, I have no idea if that's what you're talking about, Gemini, but if you're looking to develop your skills, it's not going to happen 9 to 5 at work. You have to invest time outside of work to do that, for sure.
No. And even my portfolio is very similar with those little games and things that I did, the little Lego thing. I was trying to put things in my portfolio that I wanted to build, and we'll talk about that as well, because if you've got things in your portfolio that you go, I never want to have anything to do with that type of content again, don't put it in your portfolio. Put things in your portfolio that are,
you want to be hired for.
That's right. If you want to build Alexa skills, if you want to build apps, build those kind of things and put them in your portfolio. This chat is absolutely going off. We've got Ashanti chatting with people. I'm trying to work out. Oh, here you go. Emma Emdo. She said, what would be the best way to have a portfolio? Just a website.
Oh gosh, you should have watched yesterday's live stream.
Yeah. Look, there's a number of things that you can do. Tim showed a good example of a Storyline course that was published, or was it a Rise course that actually had assets in there that just went off to a domain name, Tim. Yeah, you can do a website. I mean, I did a thing yesterday with Ashanti Henderson on using Google Sites. I mean, honestly, if you just need a website, you can do that in a day. You can get something up and live. It may not be a forever website, but it's giving you something, and all it's costing you is the domain name. It's $12. It's so cheap.
I think having a portfolio, even if you're just doing something on Google Sites and it's a single page and it's just a place that you can put your image, some information about you, and even if it's just screenshots of some of your work, even if you have that and your own domain, putting that on your resume or having that available during an interview, just that little bit of effort is so much more than what 95% of candidates are doing nowadays. And it just takes that little bit of effort to separate yourself from the rest of the group to put you to the top and make you memorable. And like Cath said, and I encourage everyone to go watch Ashanti's live stream yesterday about portfolios. Is I didn't even know Google Sites was. I thought that was like an old thing that died like
did I?
With Google Plus years ago, and I was just blown away by what this really, really easy to use website building tool. And so even if it's just Google Sites or one of the template based tools from GoDaddy or Wix, starting small and simple is just enough to put you over that edge with those potential clients or employers.
Yeah. And look, Tim had a presence out there for a long time. I've had my website for a long, long time too. And I used to have a horrible blog when I traveled, like on the ships. I actually had this blog.
Is it
It was a
still out there
WordPress blog.
somewhere?
No, I deleted it, and now my business page is what used to be the blog years ago. So the thing is, it's kind of evolved. You know, I had a blog, and I was like, no one other than my mom and dad read this because I was, you know, the other side of the world.
Yeah.
I deleted it. I put a resume up. I got a template from Theme Forest. It was kind of a template, resume template WordPress site. So I filled that in. I started putting portfolio items. And that's actually when I started getting people reaching out to me saying, hey, you know, we're looking for a freelancer. And I said, oh, I work full time. I can't do it. You know, I can do it maybe on the evenings and weekends if that interests you. And that was it. I just started taking on little freelance jobs until my wife just said, I think it's time. You're actually knocking back so much work to stay on your full-time job that I think you'd have more fun if
how long were you doing it during your nights and weekends before you went full-time? How many years did you do it during your nights and weekends?
Maybe two years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, they were I was really reluctant to take on jobs until I had actually government departments reaching out to me saying, hey, we've got a job. And that was a lot of money for these projects. And I was going, oh no, I'm working for, you know, and that was it. It just said, just do it. And like I said to you, that advice where you reached out to me and said, hey, I think I want to go full time.
Yeah.
You know, any advice? And I said, you'll be scared for a couple of weeks and then, you know, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so I waited. I did it during my nights and weekends for like 10 years before I made the leap, and I was super conservative about it. And the question I asked Cath and two other people this question of how much did you have in savings when you made the leap, and how long was it after you made the leap did you realize you were going to be okay? And I don't remember how much you told me you had in savings, or if you told me at all. I think some people had months, some people had weeks. I waited until I had a year's worth of my pay to make the leap. And for me, I knew within 2 weeks I was going to be just fine. And I think, you know, making the leap into freelancing, it's nothing that I don't think anybody should take lightly. It's a huge life decision that you're making, because there's a lot you lose out on, especially if you live in the States. I mean, you don't get healthcare, you know, you don't get benefits, you don't get a 401k. Those are things you all have to do on your own. And then you pay more taxes on top of it. But I mean, the benefits of, like we were talking about earlier, like, you know, I can take an afternoon off, or I can take a week off, or I can work whenever I want, or choose what I want to work on and not work on. Like, all of those benefits outweigh any of the benefits I would have received at a company. And then on top of that, like, I make a buttload more than I made when I was working in corporate America. I wasn't expecting that, but, you know, I'm really happy about it. Don't get me wrong. So, you know, I think the best thing for anyone to do is start doing your nights and weekends, and then and get your feet wet, and figure out what your niche is, and how you want to be, what you want to be hired for, and how you want to market yourself. And once you figure that all out, making this decision to go full time, you'll know when that's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an exciting industry, and I love the fact that if I have a client, you know, I get client inquiries a lot. I probably reject a lot more. Well, obviously it's just me, so I reject a lot. But I just take on the ones that I'm interested in doing, you know, or that I think are going to be a good learning experience, because I don't want to just, make mind-numbing e-learning. And you know, I'm pretty sure as well, you have a choice of the projects that you want to take on, and things that you get a feeling straight away, or this sounds like it's going to be a great learning experience or great
Yeah.
company to work with.
I talked to Ant Pugh about this on his YouTube channel, I don't know, a month or so ago. And the thing, the great thing about when you make the leap, how much ever money you need to have in your bank account to feel comfortable, that's a personal decision. But having money in the bank account totally changes your decision-making about what clients you choose to take on and not take on. Because for me, I had a year's worth of savings. I was very fortunate. Don't get me wrong. I know how fortunate, that's a huge thing to do. But it enabled me to be choosy about what clients I chose to take on. I wasn't taking them on out of desperation to pay my bills next month. I was taking them on, based off of whether it interests me, whether it was worth my time, and whether or not, I thought it was going to be something that would further my career by being something portfolio worthy or whatever the case might be.
So,
yeah,
it's very interesting when you start out. I was happier taking on little jobs with a smaller budget, and as I have over the years been doing this on my own, I just go with my gut feeling what's going to be. I think right now there's obviously a bit of desperation to get e-learning modules up, and I think that there's a lack of education for people out there who they don't understand how long it takes to create an e-learning course. I literally had to say to someone a couple of weeks ago, I listened to them talk about what they needed, and it was so cheeky, but I actually said, do you understand how long it takes to create an e-learning course? And she said, well, the way you've just said that to me, I'm presuming it's quite a long time. And I said, well, yeah, she needed like 5 modules done in 2 weeks. And I just said, the kind of work that I do, you don't do in
no. What I've learned to do is I don't say no anymore. I say yes and. So if they say I want 5 modules in 2 weeks, I go, yeah, I can create 5 modules in 2 weeks, but it's not going to be cheap and it's probably not going to be good. We can do that if you want. I can build 5 modules in Rise and copy and paste some text in it, but it's not going to be what you want.
Yeah.
What do you want? You know what I mean? So I think, the interesting thing about being a freelancer, I know we're kind of going down a different road here, but the interesting thing about being a freelancer is, yes, you have to vet clients, and there's always going to be, for every amazing client, there's 10 awful ones that come through your email box. I just spoke to someone earlier today. It was a total waste of my time. And I have those almost on a daily basis, but going through that process, I find the good ones. But here's the thing. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I said, the great thing about it is that when you're freelancing, however you choose to charge, I charge by the hour. Sometimes I charge by the project. Either way, if they're wasting your time, there's a tangible dollar value that you can put on that. When you work in an organization, stakeholders waste your time and they don't think about it because it doesn't come out of their pocketbooks. They don't see the dollars that they're wasting of your time. And depending on the politics of your organization, there's really nothing you can do about it. For me as a freelancer, if somebody's going to waste my time, I go, fine, this is how much I'm charging you per hour. And then they go, oh gosh, well, I don't want to waste your time anymore. So it creates it evens the playing field between you and the stakeholders you're working with. And you don't always get that working for an organization.
Yeah. And I know we've kind of gone a little bit down. This is what me and Tim do, right? Apart from the fact that we can drink a lot of Moscow Mules together. We drank a lot of Moscow Mules together one night
in Vegas.
So we go down a rabbit hole. But it's this is just an industry that there is so much possibility, guys. If this is something that you want to get into, the sky's the limit, and only you are the one that is going to hold yourself back. We both, well, I won't say you learned the same way as me, but I'll tell you what, when you've got things like Articulate Heroes and you've got YouTube right now, you can learn anything. You can absolutely learn anything. I mean, I have the tool that I work out of all day long is Adobe Creative Cloud. I'm going up down another thing here, but YouTube is a game changer. You can learn absolutely so much with regards to skilling yourself up to do different things. And you can also use the resources like Upwork and, Emma Pawson is someone that I talk a lot about. If there's something that you can't do, there's always someone out there who can do it. So if someone came to me and said, I'd like to build, so on and so forth, I would be open to saying, let me go and, look into that for you. Let me see if I can get a team, even though it might not be something that I can do. I might not tell the client that I don't know how to do it, because I can find someone to help me do that. If that's something that I'm interested in doing, there's always someone out there who can design things for you, who can develop something that is way beyond your capability, or code something for you. So the sky's the limit, right?
I mean, if we go back to like the basics, I mean, when I go back to my very first e-learning project, I mentioned a moment ago, it was 5 e-learning courses on how to catch shoplifters. And that project, we had to hire actors and we had to go into a store and film all of these really cool things. And at the time, I was a 23-year-old who worked in a department store catching shoplifters. And when all of that was like thrusted upon me, one of the things I think I learned from that experience was, the power of throwing yourself in the deep end and navigating those waters. And I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like Cath and I were just talking before the live stream. I don't know anything about YouTube live streaming, but we talked about it, and that's something I'm interested in. And I know nothing about video production, but I'm willing to try, and if you were to go look at my YouTube history, there's hours of, me learning about lighting and things in Adobe Illustrator or whatever the case might be. And so, I think people think one of the myths is that, if you're a freelancer or you're really successful in this industry, it's because you have some sort of formal education. And the reality is no. The only difference is I'm just willing to try it and, figure it out along the way. And I'm going to make mistakes, but that's how you grow.
That's exactly right. And Ashanti's actually kind of got a good question along this way. What's your take on self-taught versus boot camp versus university degree, certificate versus horizontal move? What path would you suggest for someone who is brand new and wants to get into e-learning?
I'll
leave
ahead.
that up, actually.
Unless you have a take, Cath, I can.
So, look, I went and did my bachelor's degree when I was working at the police. Did I learn anything? Do you know what? I had some 65-year-old man say to me one day at the police academy, "Oh, you can't do that. You don't have a education qualification," right? And instead of turning around to him and saying, "Oh, but you did like 40 years ago, so, it's not very relevant," I got myself so hung up that I went to university and I did a Bachelor of Adult Learning and Development. And all I did was I was able to put a theorist's name to a term like community of practice. I still understood that because I'd been working in the industry already for 10 years. However, it did help me. It did help me with regards to research and things like that. Then I obviously went and I did my master's degree and I specialized in digital technologies and education. And now I'm looking at doing a PhD. So I don't discourage it. Okay. I don't discourage it at all, but Beth, I wouldn't say my skills as an e-learning designer are better because I went and I did these qualifications. It didn't. Absolutely not.
I think I'll give you my experience. Now, this is my honest opinion based off my experience. There's going to be people who disagree with this, and that's fine. That's part of having the debate. I don't think it's worth your time to go get a formal education in instructional design or education to be in this industry. Not that it can't help you. To your point, Cath, it helps you understand the theory and you have a better understanding and respect for it. It'll definitely give you a leg up in your career. For me, like I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Have I used that at all in my career? No. It was a $60,000 piece of paper. How it has helped me is it's a line item on my resume that gets me through the recruiter to the next stage. And so for me, I think it's important to be really honest about why you're going to go do whatever it is you're going to do. So for people who are looking to move into e-learning, do you need to go get a degree in instructional technology? No. Can it help you? Can it help you get your foot in the door? Absolutely. Can it give you a leg up on understanding the theory? Absolutely. But you don't need it. And to your point, Cath, it doesn't make you a better practitioner in what it is that we do. I've worked with people who have PhDs in this, and they're as dumb as a doornail or doorknob, whatever the expression is. And so it doesn't make you a better practitioner. It doesn't make you better in anything that we do. It can give you a leg up. And so for me, I think it's important that you find whatever is going to best work for you. I'm one of those people. I like to figure it out on my own. I might go on YouTube and I'll figure it out. Other people want to go to a boot camp like Ashanti mentioned, or do something that's more cohort based. If that works for you, then do it. Just make sure you understand what your intention is behind doing it before you go spend a bunch of money.
So the reason I wanted, I'm going to go off topic for a second, because, for example, your book, you go through all the theory in your book, right? If I had actually bought your book at that point, I probably could have it would have significantly helped me, okay? Because nice. through what you were talking about, I can now align it to theories. But I'm going to say one thing.
Yeah.
I do a lot of Skillshare courses, Treehouse courses, and I talk to Janine, my wife, a lot about formal qualifications. And I say, you know, you may get hung up over not having a formal qualification, but that it all becomes old. Like in 10 years, a lot of that is going to be just redundant. If you continue to do a lot of the courses now, you'll be far better placed. Like Google now are hiring people. Like I've heard these stories where there was a lad who did loads of Harvard edX courses and Treehouse courses and other courses, and he got hired at Google. He's got absolutely no formal qualification. They value his current knowledge on the topic more than having a formal qualification.
Well, because you know what that is? You know what that is because employers, I think the smart employers, care about what you can do right now. They don't care how you learned how to do it. They care that you can do it. And so I've been on the side of having to hire instructional designers and e-learning developers and graphic designers. And I'll tell you, you know, it's really cool when you get a resume with somebody who has 20 years of experience and a master's degree, but when they can't demonstrate their skills or they don't have a portfolio, then I really don't care. Anyone can say they can do storyline on a resume. It's a different thing when you can actually demonstrate those skills. And so more and more employers are caring, in my opinion, care more about what you can offer right now, regardless whether you have 2 years of experience or 20 years of experience. I would rather hire an e-learning developer who can use Storyline efficiently and design an amazing course, even if they learned it in the past 6 months, versus somebody who has 20 years of experience and they can't even open a computer. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
I would rather hire for skills. And as a freelancer, I don't know if this is your experience, Cath, since I've gone into freelancing, and even when I was freelancing during my nights and weekends, I don't ever get asked about my experience or my credentials. People care about what I can do. They care about my portfolio. That's all they care about. At the end of the day, it's about what you can do. And so, you know, you can go get a formal education, but it's not going to help you do things better.
And I'm going to tie this in before we talk about your book. The reason that I want to do, I'm interested in doing a PhD. I may not do it, but I'm interested, is I want to research digital credentials. I believe that anyone can just write any bullshit, pardon my French, on their resume.
Yep.
I actually think the future is going to be that you're going to need to prove, going to need to show evidence that you can do a lot of these skills. And our resume is going to become a digital resume. Yep. And I believe I want to do a little bit more research into this. I certainly don't think that we're doing enough with digital accreditation.
Yep.
So, for example, on my website, I've got my Treehouse course badges, and I love it because I've done absolutely loads of them. And straight away, people can see, well, she's doing training right now. She's constantly learning, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one thing. But there's other platforms like Skillshare that aren't doing any digital badges. And, you know, I'm taking courses with the Future right now. I'm doing their boot camp, their business boot camp. And I mentioned to them about digital badges in the conversation recently. I want that. I want to show it on my LinkedIn resume and on my website. I want people to be able to click it and see what I did to learn that information, So that's why I'm interested in it. But let's talk about your book, because I actually, I was lucky. You sent me through the second edition and I sat and I read it and I love it. I've got the first edition here, which
I've got the second
I bought at DevLearn last year.
Yeah.
I know, look at it. Let's hold it up, actually. Let's see how much
might be in reverse,
additional information.
There it is. Ooh, look at that.
Yeah. So you've made it more square, haven't you? So
I did. I needed more space per page.
And I really liked it, guys, for a lot of reasons. Tim's got, I've got a signed edition. Oh, wow.
Oh, do you? Oh,
that's cool.
You have to sell that on eBay edition. One day.
Sell it on eBay. You know, I really love how Tim ties it in with theory. So he's got the theories, he's got the principle behind the theories, which I think is fantastic. I like the way that you kind of, even when you're talking about pedagogy and andragogy, and you're talking about the difference between those learning, I just like that kind of delivery, and I like how that was broken down. I love your pro tips.
Thank you.
The way that you've got little spaces for people to leave notes. I know you had that in your original book, but especially when someone's gone out and they've bought a book like this and they can write notes as they go along. I just really love it.
Thank you. I think my light went out back here. I'll have to fix that.
Oh.
It just flashed. That's why I noticed it. So I don't know if a lot of people know the story about how my book came about, and I think it's an interesting story that a lot of people don't. I don't tell this story very often. So if you don't mind, I'll tell a little bit about the history of the book and what led me to the second edition. So, you know, I wrote the book. The first edition came out, I think, in 2017 or 2018. I always forget. But the first edition of the book, like, I wrote it for people like myself or like yourself who fell into this industry and they really had no idea where to begin. And the content of the first edition of the book ultimately came out of my experience when I joined GoDaddy. I worked at GoDaddy for about 2.5 years before I started my own business. And I inherited this team of 4 people. I don't call them e-learning designers because they weren't e-learning designers at the time. I inherited these 4 team members, and my task at the time was to teach them how to develop e-learning. And so I put together this little curriculum and this content, this slide deck, and I walked them through the entire process. And it was through that experience I was like, oh gosh, I have the content for a book here. And so I wrote the book. And you know, the first edition of the book, it's really it's less about instructional design and more about the process of working with your stakeholders, planning your project, kind of the logistics of managing a learning project. And you know, when I went freelancing full time last year, I knew I wanted to write. At the time, I wanted to write a second book. I wanted it to be a series, and the second book was going to be focused on instructional design. And I realized though, I couldn't talk about instructional design and how to create effective e-learning without talking about all of the things in the first edition. And so what I realized is that I needed to write a second edition of the book that not only talked about working with stakeholders and subject matter experts and managing your projects and storyboarding, but also like the process that goes into creating something that's actually going to deliver results. So how do you determine whether or not training is the answer? How do you determine whether or not e-learning is even the answer? How do you design a learning intervention that's not just e-learning or instructor-led training or a job aid or video? How do you create a blended approach? And how do you use interactivity that actually drives performance rather than just clicking? Those are all the things that, you know, I think I mentioned on my website, there's 3 times as much content in the second edition. And so I literally, like, every page was rewritten. And so, yeah, I'm super happy about it, to have it done. There was a period maybe a month ago, I wasn't sure whether or not I was ever going to finish it this year, but like I hunkered down and I wrote that thing. And so I'm so happy to have it finished.
And it's really just the visuals that are in there, Tim, are so useful. Like, I love the Gantt chart and different visuals showing your different documents, you know, storyboard, and how you break down each element of a storyboard. I think people are going to find that so useful.
Yeah.
I think there is no right and wrong with how you do a lot of these things, but to at least have a visual from someone with your caliber, Tim, you know, that you're showing how this is how you basically do it. I think that's, you know, going to be super useful for everyone. I mean, I certainly will thoroughly enjoyed reading it and learned tons from it. So
yeah, and to your point, there is no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, people get in these debates about ADDIE or SAM or you know, iterative or waterfall approaches, or should you, you know, and so the book is based off of my experience and what's worked for me in my career. And so, you know, I don't proclaim to be an expert. I mentioned that in the foreword of the book that, you know, it's based off of my experience. And you know, one of the things I've tried to embrace over the years is, you know, I'm going to share and teach everything I know, and some people are going to disagree with it, and that's great, you know, but that's how we contribute to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's the way it is. We're always going to have people who don't agree with terms that we use and approaches that we use. I believe it varies for each project, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, it does vary.
You have to decide on what's going to be the right approach. I'm looking at some of these questions here. They're having an internal conversation with one another, which is actually really confusing me. So let's see if we've got anything else. We've got Chris. Oh, Troy Ashman has said, I love the book. Chris has said, I've just pre-ordered your book, Tim. Looking forward to it.
We should mention that. So if anyone, if you don't mind me just doing the shameless plug, if anyone's interested, so you can pre-order the book right now between now and September 4th. It'll go on live on Amazon September 8th, but you can pre-order it now and get 30% off. So I think, Cath, did you put a link down in the description?
I did.
I assume. Okay, yeah. So you can check that out and pre-order it.
Yeah. And Ashanti asked a question, but I think it's a bit old. Can you talk about the difference between the editions? So you've already done that. She said about there's a 30% discount. She's all over it. Endo says, yeah, got my book, bought the first one on Amazon too. Okay. Melissa, who are the e-learning agencies out there?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean,
so when I'm talking about an agency, I'm talking about like Akineo, Litmus,
eLearning Brothers.
eLearning Brothers. You know, these are, or you could call them vendors. SweetRush. These are companies that have quite big teams behind them. They may just do e-learning design and development, but they also may be like a vendor that has a LMS behind them as well. So but ultimately they've got multiple requests coming in all the time for content, and the project managers there are lining you up as a e-learning. So my role when I worked for an agency was an instructional designer. So that meant that I did everything up to the learning strategy, course overview, storyboard, and then a developer did the development work. Now, of course, I do the whole thing, but
so most agencies,
a lot of these companies have those kind of teams broken down.
So most agencies, fun fact, most agencies aren't, it's not usually a group of actual learning professionals. They're mostly the people who work full-time at the agency are usually a group of project managers, and all of the actual development work is usually subcontracted to freelancers. And there's some freelancers who specialize in subcontracting with these agencies. That's a great way to get your foot in the door. I don't do a lot of subcontracting anymore, but that's how I started, was a lot of subcontracting. And so, agencies are usually, it starts with a learning professional, and then they become the CEO, and then they hire people to sell and project manage, and then subcontract out actual work to freelancers.
Yeah. And you might actually, so this is going to sound maybe a bit silly, but you might go, well, why doesn't someone like Tim do subcontracting? Or why doesn't Cath do subcontracting? Because when I have someone reach out to me now and say, oh yeah, we're a company, we're looking for a sub, and I say, you actually can't afford me. By the time you want to make a profit on this, but I'm already at a level that I'm doing this end to end. So I say, you're not going to be able to afford
there's
bring me on.
There's pros and cons to subcontracting. So if you're new, if you want to get your feet wet in freelancing, subcontracting is good, because usually the scope of your work is really specific. Like, you might be hired to develop it in storyline. Somebody else is doing the stakeholder management. Somebody else is doing the storyboarding. You're just worrying about putting it together in storyline. The cons to subcontracting, though, it's important to know that there's more people who need piece of that pie. So if the agency's charging the client $150 an hour, well, you're not going to get $150 an hour, because the agency has to make money. So you're going to make less, but the scope of your work is going to be more specific. I don't subcontract for the same reason Cath mentioned, is they can't afford me. And also because you're not going to, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to put that on your portfolio, because it's not your project, it's the agency's project, and it's the agency's client. And you're probably not going to have a lot of face time with that client. And so you might further your career at that agency, but they're kind of the glass ceiling. Like, you're not going to be able to have that client on for the long term. So once you become more of an established freelancer, subcontracting doesn't make sense, in my opinion.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things that I don't do. And it's a regular thing that I get contacted, and I just say, it's not worth your while to bring me on board, bring someone else on board.
It's the same reason, it's the same reason I don't do Upwork or Fiverr or those freelancing services, because those clients, when they go out there, and not to say you shouldn't do it, like, that's great if you're starting, but they're hiring the cheapest possible labor they can get to do it. They're not hiring me. They're hiring whoever's going to give it to them as cheap, as fast as they can. And so, that's why I don't do that either.
And that's the difference, guys. So people are going to Tim Slade because they want Tim Slade. People are coming to Cath Ellis because they want Cath Ellis. So just think about that, and think about the way that you want to
put yourself
out to the industry. You know,
the challenge for people, for folks like Cath and myself, is, in order for people to hire us for us, it requires us to do all of these extra things beyond our hourly development work, like doing this, or writing a book, or hosting a conference, or speaking at a conference, or having a blog, or being active on LinkedIn. All of those things contribute to, ultimately, those high-paying clients hiring me for me, or Cath for Cath. If I wasn't doing all of that, I would just be some random guy, on LinkedIn, being hired for, low pay work.
Yeah.
Does that make
Absolutely.
sense? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I mean, and as you get more established, I will say that the sky is the limit with what you can do.
Yeah.
We have got people out there in the industry right now, young guns, I call them young guns. Devlin Peck is one who is absolutely killing it out there. He is spending a lot of time researching, creating content, contributing to the community. So just like Tim said, the sky's the limit with what you can do in this industry. And it's an exciting industry. It's a very niche industry, so it's small. A lot of us know one another, personally, we know one another. So it's exciting. And I think another thing we were saying, Tim, is how at the moment this COVID-19 has really brought a lot of learning designers together. Like, I'm looking at comments of people who have had a bad, they've been knocked back for jobs, and I'm seeing language like, give me a call, I'll have a chat with you. And, I feel like we're really looking out for one another.
Yep.
So feel free to, to reach out to us to get our advice. If we'll help, we absolutely will.
I did this last week. I get emails all the time or LinkedIn messages from people who want my tips or advice about something. And one of the things I've started doing recently is I'm just sending them a link to my calendar. I'm like, book an hour, I'll give you an hour. And I found, like, I'm getting as much as they're getting out of it, like, I'm getting so much out of it by talking to these people. And it's just it's a different way for me to contribute back to the industry.
Yeah. And the same way, I do an e-learning hangout once a month. The only difference is the time difference, Australia and the rest of the world. That's why we're down under.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of people like us who are contributing a lot to the industry. So just take as much as you can. There's lots of conferences that are free. There's, just the conversations on LinkedIn. You should be learning absolutely loads. I've got a comment here from Melissa. Thank you. I'm a trainer, project manager, account manager from an ad agency, but I really want to get that real experience as an ID, as you mentioned earlier, before I jump into freelancing. And I suggest that you absolutely do that. And, if you're not confident, freelancing can, if you're not confident with the process and costing things up right and understanding how to manage things like scope creep and how to manage your client properly, you can have a bit of a disaster. You can start hating the industry a little bit, can't you, Tim?
Yeah. You absolutely can. And, one of the things I learned is I think there's a misconception that people who freelance full-time are experts in all the facets of what we do. And one of the things I learned really early on is that I can be a successful freelancer specializing in some really specific things, the things that I'm good at and the things that I enjoy. And so let me give you a really great example. Like, one of the things I like to tell people, and it kind of creates this cognitive dissonance in some folks' mind, I'm not a big fan of instructional design. I'm not a big fan of needs analysis and reverse engineering a performance issue and figuring it out. What I really enjoy doing and what I'm really passionate about and what I'm good at is creating these really visually engaging, immersive experiences in a digital format. And so I focus my effort towards marketing myself as somebody who creates beautiful e-learning, highly interactive and engaging. I consider myself, you asked us at the beginning, what do I call myself? Well, really, I'm a multimedia developer. That's really, really what I am, specializing in e-learning development. And so to that point, you know, you don't have to become an expert in all facets of what it is that we do. Figure out what you really love and what you're passionate about and what you can market yourself as, and lean into that. You know, that's what I've chosen to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's this is one of those things that we could just talk about for forever.
Yeah.
But we've been talking for nearly, over an hour now, and I'm sure people are like, okay, when are they going to wrap this up? Let's just see if we've got any more questions out there. If you don't want to be in business for yourself, that's a biggie. Plenty of ID. If you don't want to be in business, that's a biggie. Plenty of ID roles with employers. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's tons of opportunity out there. Yeah.
Look at it, and we're not encouraging you to jump out and become a freelancer. Here's what I would do. This is the way that I used to kind of go from one job to the next. When I was leaving the police, I said, what is my dream job? Where do I want to? What are the companies that I want to work for? Who do I look up to? Who's creating really great learning experiences? And just apply for them.
Yep.
You know, there are some absolutely brilliant companies out there. You might be interested in going into something more along the lines of VR or AR or, you know, voice. Voice is an exciting industry right now. You know, so, and I still class these as learning, though they may not class them as learning. I certainly do. So think about these different angles that you can go. Just follow your dreams, apply. It's not going to cost you anything. And, you know, if you're interested in a certain field, start learning it, start building things so you can go to that company and you can show I'm the right person for this for your company. So, and again, this is all about you. It's you being motivated to go out there today. If you don't own it, buy your own domain name. It's going to cost you. It could cost you $5. It could cost you $10. Buy your domain name. Build some kind of landing page. Here's something that's really interesting. I'll say to you, Tim. I haven't been asked for a resume in years.
No.
Someone actually asked me for a resume recently, and they worked for an agency that every time they contact me, I say, no, I don't have availability for you. I'm booked for 6 months, a year, you know. And they go, oh, okay, well, we'll reach out next year. Can you just send through a resume? And I just go, no, I can't send you a resume. My portfolio's there.
Yeah, the last time I updated my resume was in 2016 when I joined GoDaddy. And to the previous point, you know, we're not, by all means, we're not saying you have to go be a freelancer. Like, that's not the end all be all or the pinnacle of our industry. You have to do what motivates you and figure out what's going to make you happy and fulfill you. I mean, when I joined GoDaddy in 2016, I did it under the mindset that, you know, if I wanted to make more and advance my career, I needed to take a senior leadership role and manage a team. And I was so mistaken. Like, I was so unhappy managing a team. I am not motivated by climbing the corporate ladder and working for corporate America and managing a team. I hate that. And so freelancing works for me. And go to your other point, Cath. Yeah, if I had to write a resume right now, it probably wouldn't be worth my time.
That's right. And I just say no. Deb Fitz said, can you please share insights on academic versus corporate learning experience ID, wanting to transition from classroom teaching to ID? Thanks.
I'll go ahead real quick, Cath. I mean, there's a huge flood of folks who are wanting to move out of higher education or K through 12 and get into the corporate world. I don't have a lot of experience in higher education or the K through 12 world. I don't know. Do you, Cath? I don't know if you have any tips on that. I think the biggest thing, as I've been talking to several people who are trying to make that transition, quick tip, because I know we're trying to wrap up, is focus on your skills and what you can do, because one of the things I've learned is that when people moving from higher education or K through 12 trying to make the leap into corporate world, people who work in the corporate world think that like K through 12 teachers, all they're doing all day is teaching kids how to glue macaroni to pieces of paper. And obviously we all know that's so far from the truth. So focus on highlighting, what you can do, so that it's, the stigma, if you will, and not that there's stigma, but the fact that you taught in a K through 12 classroom doesn't become a barrier to entry for a potential employer.
Yeah, and Ashanti had some advice because she's also a teacher that's transitioned into ID.
Oh, good.
And she said most classroom teachers know, are going into corporate with pay being a huge motivation factor, and that makes a lot of sense. Corporate learning experience design ID is more diverse and gives you more options.
Absolutely.
Now, I'd say to the people who reach out to me and who want to transition, I say to them, download Articulate Storyline, invest into a tool. You don't have to invest into all of them. If people say to me, how many tools do you use? Articulate Storyline and Adapt. That's what I use. And I've got a fully responsive option, and I use Evolve as well, but really my go-to is Adapt and Storyline. And just start playing with the tool, start building content. This is why it's important you have a portfolio or you have a presence out there. Mm-hmm. Start blogging, start learning, start sharing.
And here's the thing,
and just start building up.
Here's the thing about that. So many people don't start a blog or share their stuff because they think, well, who am I? I'm not the expert in doing that. There's tons of experts out there. Here's the thing about that. I'm not I wrote a book on something I'm not an expert on. I'm not an expert on any of this. Cath, you're not an expert on anything more than anyone else is, right? But here's the thing about the power of it. If you write a blog on, I'll make something up, like writing really effective quiz questions. Yeah, you're not the expert on writing effective quiz questions. You're not the first person to write a blog on effective quiz questions, but somebody will stumble across it that will be looking for that information. And if they happen to stumble across your blog post first, which will happen, then you become their expert. So, you don't need to be an expert in anything to share your experiences. And that's what I've tried to, like, whenever I feel that imposter syndrome, I realize, no, I'm not trying to be an expert in anything. I'm just trying to share my experiences. And if people benefit from it, great, then I've done a good job.
And this is going to be controversial as well, but I'm going to say this. I get a lot of people reaching out to me who say, I want to become an instructional designer. I've been playing around. So this is an Emma Pawson example. I want to, this was a number of years ago, I want to transition out of being a teacher into instructional design. And I've been playing around with Storyline. I'm really good at it. How can I do it? And I said, are you passionate about instructional design or being an e-learning designer? Yes. I said, then you are one. Who is the police that is going to say that your position now is an instructional designer or an e-learning designer or a learning experience designer? If you feel that that is what you do, that is what you are. The only industry that this is different is when you're a lawyer or when you're a doctor or when there's something that is important that you need to have that piece of paper. Other than that, you can call yourself, there are going to be, Ant Pugh asked a really good question the other day. He said, if you could do something different, what would you do? And I, like a controversial person, said, I would have become a user experience designer, right? Mm. And again, this is a whole other conversation, but if I decided tomorrow, I don't want to do learning experience design anymore, I want to become a user experience designer, who's to say that someone is there to choose what position that I'm going to call myself? Yeah. Guys, you just have to feel it in yourself, but you have to put the hard yards in here. If you want to transition out, go jump on YouTube, learn, make new things, get onto Articulate Heroes or whatever tool you're using in their community, get feedback. If you feel that that's what your future is, you are that. That is it.
There's this maybe only a few people will resonate with this. My two favorite movies growing up was Sister Act and Sister Act 2. And there's this really amazing scene in Sister Act 2 where Whoopi Goldberg is talking to little Lauryn Hill, who wants to be a singer. And she tells her, if you want to be a singer, you're a singer. If you want to be an author, you're an author. And it sounds so stupid, but I remind myself of that all the time.
Yeah. I watched Sister Act 2 last night, you know.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow. That's so weird.
I did. God, we're lame.
Yeah, we are.
But look, this has been absolutely brilliant, guys. I hope that you've got a little bit of wisdom, right? Don't take this too seriously. There is a whole community out there of people who will support you, who will help you, but you are the only ones that can choose your destiny. So just go and learn and enjoy it. Have fun. This is a great industry to be in. And I mean, last words of advice from you, Tim?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Just do it.
Just do it.
You caught me off guard. Yeah, just do it. Don't share your experiences. Don't worry about being an expert. Just share your experiences.
If you're a new designer, right? Even if you're not a new designer, this was a great buy for me. I bought this and I've been in the industry for years and years and years. This is great. It not only summarizes a lot of the fundamentals that you need to know with regards to developing content, instructional design. It's got the theory behind it. It's just got great stories throughout it, lots of tips. So, you know, I'm hoping that I'm doing your book justice here, Tim, but I reckon, you know, go ahead, buy the book. And I'll say it, I'm sure Tim's the same. If you've got questions from us, we never ignore people. Just reach out and we'll do as much as we can to help you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me,
guys. Any further questions, put them in the comments below. Tim, I'm sure will check the episode you know, later on today, and if there's anything, we'll answer up the questions. So
sure. Thank you
very much for your time. That's 1 hour and 20 minutes, Tim.
It was good.
Crazy. It's good.
Yeah.
Me and you can just, you know, natter on forever.
Yes.
All right. Take care, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.